The excitement building.
Oh, there. I think we went live for real this time.
I am going to also.
I almost feel like this is happy hour too, since we're kind of on a season 2. We can kind of do whatever we want.
Like that plan. Since we were renewed, right?
That's right. What are you guys drinking for after hours as we're answering questions?
Right. I'm right now, although usually not the case. I'm just going with seltzer. But let's see, I'm going to come down one. Nice. Swizzle?
Swizzle by Cidergeist.
So
I like that.
I tried something last night. A buddy of mine brought over, and it is okay. The name is long. It is Hard Mountain Dew Baja Blast Zero, and it's 5% alcohol. And the first taste was okay. This isn't bad, and the more I drank, the worse it got.
I was gonna say that was all in the name. That's
Yeah.
why.
Yes.
I'm all about the dark beers usually, and we have one from a local brewery here called
Oh, yikes!
There it is.
Didn't realize I had the timer set up on as we're working on the new setup here. All right, here we go. Yikes. Ooh, welcome back, everybody, for a night that I wasn't thinking we were going to do right away. This is ServiceNow's Community College Open Office Hours. I'm Professor B, Prof. Ben, joined, as always, by my intrepid co-host, Prof. Sean. And tonight we've actually got a couple of special guests because we're going to be trying to figure out what we're doing in this second arc of our of the show here, because we were really kind of doing this whole shtick originally to get everybody pushed through their CSA exams, and then we thought, you know what? Why stop when we can keep going? Why? This is what the writers' room at Lost probably said at ABC, and we're like, oh, let's just keep going. Let's see where this goes. Because I feel like
after or before the smoke monster.
Probably right after. I heard tell that there was a whole shtick about the polar bear that they just put that in there just to see what would happen, and then they never figured it out by the end. So, spoiler alert. By the way, I've never seen Lost, like at all. I've just heard people joke about it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm joined tonight, of course, by Sean, and then by a couple of newbies to the show, Emily and Brad. Welcome, guys. Who are going to be helping us ask or answer a question: what else can we do with this platform? Right. So rather than doing our back to first principles in our kind of traditional way, we're going to be talking about. So you've taken the CSA. What do you do next? Right. What do you do next? And I think, Sean, you had some like an article that you were going to post about this too, right? Like a ServiceNow.
Yeah. One of the things that I had thrown out, and I think we've got more coming along this line, is I threw a question out on the LinkedIn feed about ServiceNow and I'm very sorry for, again, TV references, right? All I think about is, dude, where's my car? No, and then.
No, and then.
I keep thinking, you know, and Ben and I got to talking about this, and I'll let Ben talk about pickles and stuff, but the Reese's peanut butter cup of almost anything, those things that go great together. So in that feed, there were some really fantastic call outs for additional certifications, but also some really cool call outs for other learning and experience. And I hope that that's something that we can carry on both in this LinkedIn, but also in other communications, both in our LinkedIn feeds and an article, as Ben said, that he and I are working on a couple of different articles in Twitter and some of those places. So I thought by kind of starting that conversation about ServiceNow and we could bring in two folks with maybe very different backgrounds or experiences to talk about what do they have in addition to ServiceNow that they're combining to make that ServiceNow opportunity kind of pop for them, or how did they combine different things to put themselves in a ServiceNow persona or work or career opportunities that they're looking for. And with that, then maybe we should let Brad and Emily introduce themselves, and I'll throw their info in our comments feed.
Go ahead, Emily.
Okay, you want me to go first? Sure, I can do that. Hey, everybody. So before becoming a ServiceNow Next-Gen intern, I decided to go back to school for myself, and I took a course through Coursera. You can find that online. It was specifically through Google, and it was called UX UI. And when I started, I had no idea what that meant. But UX stands for user experience, and UI is user interface. So it was a 7-month-long course. It was self-paced, and it really teaches you how a user experiences a product. And that can be anything from software all the way up to how you walk through a door. You know, you want to push and it's a pull, and we've all done that. So
that Far Side comic, right? Like School for the Gifted.
Yeah, exactly. So it relates to any way that someone experiences something, and then specifically user interface is more geared towards like our ServiceNow and how we see things on our phone, on our computer, etc. So it was a really neat course, and it taught me basically how to be an empath for other people.
I love that idea. So first off, I never would have thought there was design behind doors. I mean, you just go through them.
It's the most ubiquitous machine we have. It's everywhere, and 50% of the people, 50% of the time, you get it wrong.
Yeah, you know, and that's poor user experience.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I feel like there's some probably fail cases with doors too, right? Push versus pull, and then probably fire, like somebody screaming fire, like in a building, and then like, gosh, if the doors go in, right, but not out, right? Like that's why maybe we have some of the door, right? Like it touches, like interface touches everything we do. Design touches everything we do. It's wild.
Right. Exactly. So
huge opportunity for Larson and Farside, right?
There we go.
You'd be surprised at how much it relates to things in your day-to-day life. So yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. So empath for other people, like as Mark's saying, that's a good call out for that, for sure.
Yep.
Perfect.
And then we have as far as our second special guest, we have contestant number 2.
My name is Brad Tony. I've been with ServiceNow working with ServiceNow for about almost 4 years, but I go way back in IT. I used to teach Unix, so SEO Unix, Solaris, HPUX, and work with, and then transitioning to Linux. But I've spent, and I think the applicable was I spent probably the last 8 years working predominantly in cloud computing. And that's really an area that ServiceNow thrives in, is working with the basically cloud computing model, and that's kind of what brought me into ServiceNow. So I've got that Unix Linux background, that storage background, the networking, but and also the cloud computing background.
So I got to ask the quintessential Unix question.
Yes,
right? One that we all sort of think about and ponder often. VI or Emacs?
There is no question. It is, and this came from one of my classes. I had someone ask whether we had to learn the 6 editor. So it is now the 6 editor forever.
All right. Like I like that. Now I feel like that definitely got us somewhere. We got a little bit of knowledge right now. The 6 editor, everybody.
The 6 editor.
All right. So panic doors, yeah. Like so speaking of Linux and Unix, Panic, Kernel Panic. Oh wow! Somehow we like tied these things together. No, so here's where I wanted to kind of continue to flesh out this question. And Emily said something in the pre-show as we were kind of getting ready to talk tonight. You were like, "Oh, I'm so excited to be in the room with somebody that's got these hard skills." When Brad started talking about Unix and networking, and then I was like, "Stop, wait."
Yeah.
So, speak more to like how I think. Oh wow. We were just talking about how design touches everything, right? User experience is everything. What's been the most interesting part of being able to sort of take that lens that you've got, that empath for other people, and as you're moving through ServiceNow space, ServiceNow world, what are some of the things you've noticed, and hard edges and all, right? Like, because let's be real honest. Like, where can we make things better, and how have you already figured out ways to take some of those things and combine those things together?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, both you guys, have been my professor through this experience, and just seeing, like, for example, service portal building, that's, we're building it on our own. But if you're talking about a client, that's where the UX side of my brain thinks, okay, what does your client need? What is their branding kit colors? How can we make the service portal accessible for people who have those accessibilities? That's visual impairments, that's hearing impairments. That's how my brain looks at these things when we're working. I'm still learning the hard skills of it, actually building the portal. Right now we're doing application development. But then today when we were working on it, I was able to say, okay, for user experience, that form is not really the way I would do it, because it's not in order. You've got who called, assigned to, and then randomly in another corner, you have the start date, but it's listed after the end date. So how can we make that user friendly to assume that your user doesn't know how to fill out anything on the form, and maybe it's their first time? So how can we make it easier for them so that it automates the process faster? Like, that's how I've been looking at it throughout this journey. I'm trying not to look so much on the making it pretty, because I do like that, but
Emily,
yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Sean.
I'm sorry. I just want to ask, let me understand a little bit. And for, I think, other people looking who've been probably focused on, ServiceNow training, how do you get good at getting that empathy for other people? Like, you mentioned a dozen things that would not probably cross my mind first. Where do you go to study that? What do you get? What certificate? And how long? What kind of stuff? How do you learn to be good at that? Or do you is there classes, or do you practice, or?
So the Google course that I took really taught me how to look at things from a user's point of view, and to take out the bias from it, because that's the biggest thing. When you're working with somebody, you may want it to look a certain way, or whatever you're building to look a certain way, but it taught me to take the implicit bias out of things and say, okay, I have everybody on the spectrum who's going to use this app. How can I, that's where you come in and you create the persona, what your user is. And that course through Google taught me, and that was 7 months of teaching how to look at things, not from your point of view, but from your user's point of view, and what your user needs and pain points, that kind of thing. So when I was done with that, I received a certificate, certified UX UI design. And that course
From Google?
From Google. Yep.
Okay.
It's a Google certificate. And it literally takes you step by step through the planning process of making something for someone, and how to look at it from someone else's point of view. I did talk to one of the guys today that kind of answers your question. He said, I really like learning all of this stuff from the client side and making it for the client. And I said, you were in the military, and I thought he was an EMT. He worked in medical. Well, that right there is an empath. I mean, that person has to empathize with other people, you know, and help them. And I think that there are ways that you can look at your life, like what you do, and try to find areas where you're helping people day to day.
Okay.
And
Now,
then if that
I'm-
answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me have a few more, and I'm sorry I keep driving more questions, and
Okay.
I want to get to those. But one of the things I wanted to ask, now I'm all fascinated about the class, right? Being a trainer, I'm going to go. Was it a lot of? I got the certificate in the test. Did you have other people that you worked with it? Was it instructor? Did you have to follow all the docs yourself? What's also interesting to me is it sounds like I can hear it in your voice. This was something you were interested in, and once you started getting there, did you just do all that stuff or dive in? Or was it that you were working with a team of people, or how did you?
Yep, it's all self-paced. So you start at the
Okay.
beginning, you have an instructor who's pre-recorded, you take it at your own pace, read all of the information, and then let's say you miss a deadline because life happens. You reset your learning goals and you turn your project in the next week. So it's really great if you wanted to, enroll in that course. Like I worked full time. So I did it in my own time at night and on the weekends. And the cool thing about it was once you made something, you turned it in, and then other people from all over the world, we had to review peers. So other people from all over the world would review whatever it is that you had made and give you feedback on that.
Okay, so it was self-paced, but you had because it was kind of a cohort model. You had feedback from people all over. The other piece
Right.
that I want to pull out, and I take notes on these things and I try to put them in the comments, but I think super interesting. That was that piece that you got interested in, and I think that for people who are doing service now and kind of really working hard to get through the cohort and maintain the discipline, working with teams and stuff, to go if there's something adjacent that you're also have that interest. It sounds like it just popped for you. You went, yeah, I want to dive more into this, and is that true? Is that kind of the feel for it?
No.
Okay.
So this is funny. I'm a military spouse and I worked full time while my husband's been in. And I needed a career that I could do anywhere and that I would help people. So I worked in dentistry, and actually my hygienist came to me and said, "Hey, I heard about this program. You're already designing for the office. You should just check it out." I had no idea
Okay.
what UX, UI meant. I had no idea what it meant to empathize with people and do user research. And I had no idea. And it really took me making the projects to understand the principles behind the projects.
Oh, wait.
Okay.
Can I highlight that? Because you just said something I think that really resonated with something that we talk about a lot, which is you started building stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you ran into some of the issues that maybe you might, as like a designer, as somebody that that would be kind of walking into some of these situations. You had to deal with some of the kind of challenges that you might actually face out in the real world. It sounds like, yeah.
The very first step is planning on pen and paper. So you create a wireframe or a design for your application. Just like we're talking about doing the application development this week, where we have to plan it out. You literally plan it out like you would make your grocery list. Okay, what do we need? What does our user need? And then from there, we would create a storyboard on paper. We actually played 2 games that were fun. One was called Crazy Eights. You literally take a piece of paper and fold it into 8 squares, and you open it up. You have 8 minutes, 1 minute per square, to design just a section of whatever it is that you're working on. And it could be ridiculous. It could be like a unicorn goes to get your mail, or, anything. But it's how would you propose fixing the issue?
So your solution, like how to find, basically coming at it with a solution, or
Yeah.
trying to instead of just suggesting the problem, trying to solve the problem, right? And then building something.
Correct. Or there was a game called How Might We's. So, if we were sitting down and we were building something for ServiceNow, we could say, how might we do this? How might we do that? And the cool thing, Google really is a proponent of literal sticky notes. You write everything down on a sticky note and you put it on a whiteboard in front of you, and then you start to group together what it is that your user needs. So, and it teaches you all of that.
I love that. And I love that like the fact that you brought up, it seems like there's two pieces. That first you had some people that you could bounce things off of, and that fact that your feedback group was all across the world was kind of cool. But I had assumed that it was just like, oh my gosh, I'm fascinated in this, but it sounds the opposite. It was an opportunity, and then you had to kind of stick with and do the drive yourself. But that's another question that I'd ask for people who are going, we have had some of those feedback comments in Twitter and in LinkedIn, and have tried to help and answer, and had some question sessions in previous episodes and seasons to talk about that. Is how do you stick with it? Because that means you're with service, you're doing ServiceNow work and sticking with that. And we know one thing for that is that cohort where you're working with a team. But the Google stuff, it sounds like you're doing a lot of that on your own, even if you hear feedback from people later. So what did you do to kind of stick with that work? Was it just the opportunity?
I think I just was really passionate about it. And then when ServiceNow fell into my lap, I mean, I found out that the spouses can do that as part of the cohort, for free alongside my husband. We're both doing it together. And I already had the principles and the knowledge of the UX. And so now I'm learning, like you, Brad, you're on, you can build things, you're on the harder side of things. I'm able to just retain that because I am passionate about it. And
but is it harder?
I was about to say, I don't think so. I think that the UI is probably going to be the big stumbling block. It really is.
Well, you guys, it seems like you're working backwards a little bit to me. That's my outside looking in. Going from Rome to San Diego is a huge jump in UI. It seems like
it is.
Yeah. And so if you are used to working in one way, like you've had it look a certain way this whole time, and then all of a sudden we have space cats. I mean, that's like a huge difference, right? Like you've been working with green and white blocks. Now all of a sudden you've got astronauts and dark mode and kind of stuff. So
that's a great point. And Brad, let me ask, because so this is part of, I think, the fun thing about bringing a panel like this together. And Ben and I were like two dogs with our tails wagging back and forth, so excited about it. We would have sides of spectrums brought in. But Brad, you come from it, as we were talking about, a different technical side.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear a little bit about that. Now, you've been doing ServiceNow for a while, but it sounds like you also were teaching for a while too. So do you want to share a little bit about your outside the ServiceNow experience and how you somehow combined it to make peanut butter and jelly?
I kind of fell into, so I've worked with computers most of my life. I mean, I was a teenage kid programming BASIC on a VIC-20 farther back than I would like to mention. And but I kind of fell into IT as a job. And I'll be honest, because I was dating someone who owned a training company, and she's like, "Hey, we need someone to come in and teach a class," But I, starting out in the Unix, I was thrown into the highly technical. You need to dig into these things, and I found that I loved it. Some of my favorite classes are the theory, like file system internals and memory management, stuff like that. That's not necessarily immediately applicable, but it's I love to know it. And in fact, this week I'm teaching a cloud class. Yeah, VIC-20, exactly. And then we bumped up to a Commodore 64. So bumped up. But I'm talking about internals for the cloud provisioning governance, and I love that stuff. The digging into the technical side. The UI is what scares me the most. Is actually developing the UI part is just, it's something that I'm having to do it. And I think Ben's kind of in the same boat. I'm not sure about Sean, but I actually, in order to keep my passion with it, I have a ServiceNow developer instance, and I use it. I built it, and I'm a board game geek. So I actually have all my board games in my instance, and I have an interface so my friends can come in and say, we want to play this game on this date. and we get a group of people together. And I mean, I use my instance for things like that, so that helps keep that passion for it going. But yeah, it's for me, it's all on a technical. I want to see the internal side.
Okay, that's interesting, and an interesting theme from both of you. I think pulling out that you're finding reasons to be interested, but I think Robert Fedoruk would be delighted to hear the tips from the last season, which was build in it.
Yeah, just building it, right?
Yeah.
But the common theme seems to be for both you guys that it was something you were interested in. There was a curiosity, and then there was interest, and then you just started digging and started building and kind of throwing yourself at it. And I think that almost universally seems to be a point where people just it's like the pull cord on the lawnmower or on the leaf blower or the whatever, right? Like where that's the starter. And once you get going, you don't have to have somebody pushing you. It's nice if they feed you stuff, but it sounds like with both of you, the common thread was you found a rabbit hole and then chased down, like you just started going down the rabbit hole. So I'm curious about, so far in each of your guys' experience, what's the most interesting component, or what's the thing that's like surprised you the most about going down one of these rabbit holes? Because it's like you both kind of gone in different directions, but with the same kind of drive. It's like, oh, this was interesting. I fell into this thing, but I found an interesting nugget. What's the most interesting thing so far, do you think?
Brad, you want to go first?
Sure. And when you say interesting, you're talking specifically about ServiceNow, correct?
No. Like specifically, like the area, like that is this thing that you found really compelling, and then you can tie it back if you want. But I think that there's like a really interesting piece here that gets to the core of what Sean and I love to talk about, which is self-starting learning, right? People being curious and trying to find ways to engender curiosity.
So, so like I said, I'm all about how things work. I'm just that's my passion is knowing how things work, and then taking that from my Unix and then the Linux, where you have to know how things work in order to really do Linux on the desktop. You've really got to be able to tinker with it and do things rather than just install and be done. I like to tie it back to ServiceNow, that how things work, digging into it. I love every day that I work with it. I'm that passion. I'm amazed by what else I can do and what I can learn about it and what it can do as overall as a platform. And I'm not trying to be ServiceNow guy, but it floors me. I'm turning over a new rock every week. I'm turning over this rock and seeing a gem of something underneath it, going, I've been working with it for several years and I didn't know that I could do this. Getting into the scripting. I'm a scripting guy. I've done, shell scripting. I've done Java programming, C and C++, and just getting into the JavaScript side and what the power is with, once you know a little bit of scripting, what you can actually do everywhere in the platform, in every aspect of the platform. It's just amazing.
It's funny. It sounds in what you're saying to me like it's that aspect when you talked about rocks. I keep hearing that quote that everybody knows, right? If you have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail.
Right.
But this is almost that flipped, right? You're looking and going, to get good at this, I have this hammer. I need to start looking at every problem and seeing if I can use this hammer with it. And that almost seems to be like the secret sauce to making it good. Because as you start using it with other things, you're like, oh, and I bet I could do this with it. Oh, I bet I could do that with it. And that makes you good at the thing by pulling your other interests in for it.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And I'm thinking about a dozen ways to try to sum that up.
I am too. And I was thinking, Emily, when you were doing the service portal stuff and bringing all kinds of great insights in to the rest of the cohort about like, oh, did you think about this person's need, or have you thought about trying to use this app if you didn't have X, Y, or Z, or if you were colorblind, or if you were doing these other options? I'm wondering, would it? I almost want to. This has been a lifelong thing for me. How do we make some of the networking stuff easier to bring people into the loop for, right? Because you start talking IP tables and people's eyeballs like roll back in their head, and I just like, like how do we make some of the cool stuff that can be done in a place like a networking environment, how do we make that user friendly? And my only the thought is like we just have to ask people that are interested in doing one and or the other. So
Yeah, I think the coolest thing about this Next Gen program is that we've been encouraged to reach out to people on LinkedIn and network. And that is for some people super like not their wheelhouse at all.
I bet.
And I have found that there are a lot of people, like I reached out to a guy today who does UX UI, and he's like, let's set up a Zoom call. Mark Scott was in here earlier. I reached out to him and said, hey, I need to know about this developer gig. Like, what is this all about? And he immediately was like, let's hop on Zoom. Let's talk about it. That's one of the cool things about the ServiceNow ecosystem from, prior outsider. Now I've got my feet wet looking in, is that everybody's been really willing to help. And I think that that's cool too with a lot of people that I found on LinkedIn. There are also groups on there if people are interested that you can go on and just look. People post in the UX UI groups daily, principles of the UX UI. Hey, look at my profile and see what you think about it. Somebody mentioned in the chat about the Coursera, that was only $40 a month. So it wasn't free and it wasn't just for military, but it was $40 a month. Just auto draft it out. And as soon as you were done, you could cancel. So if anybody's interested, it's pretty affordable.
We'll have to throw some links in the chat or in the show notes for that for sure. Because it seems like it was pretty helpful.
I'm working
go
that
ahead.
angle. Oh, sorry. I'm working that angle as well. And I'll put in one thing I'll mention with Coursera in general. Coursera has both free courses and pay for courses and membership courses. One of the really amazing things on Coursera or its, I guess, competitor edX, that idea of a massively open online course is that many of the colleges and universities push information through them. And you can take the level that you want to from a pay version. And not to necessarily plug those as resources, but they're great resources. So I'll post them up in the chat.
And Alyssa is here too. She was in the chat earlier and she just found through it's ACT, and I think she can probably post it too, but
nice.
It's a site through Facebook that if you sign up, you can take a free Coursera course. So if it's something that someone's interested in, there are ways to get that learning to you. But
I'm going to pull in one thought, and I want to see, just tell me if I'm right about this, because one of the things that you were saying was with the Coursera or the edX is kind of bringing in, it almost seems like a little of the networking stuff you talked about with LinkedIn. If either of those things for motivation, you're bringing in resources that you need to reach out to or people that you want to tie in to get successful. Is that true? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Say that again. What was
it seems like combining the resources that are available, and there's gazillions of them, whether it's Coursera, edX, or whatever, is combining that with the skill of networking, reaching out to people.
Yes.
And so now you have the knowledge, but the people help connect that.
Yeah, and I don't know if people know this or not, but somebody told me in my cohort, if you just put in, for example, ServiceNow and then a semicolon and then whatever it is you're looking for, so developer, it pulls up everybody in the area that's a developer. I mean, and all over too. So let's say you wanted to say there's a good UX group with ServiceNow. You could put in ServiceNow and semicolon and UX, and anything that's affiliated with it will come up. So if you're looking for people to talk to that are in, like, for example, I'm looking at people who are in ServiceNow, then you can do that kind of cheat that way and also get to the people.
So kind of helping find ways to just meet up with people, almost like a snug, but just in terms of just like reaching out.
Through LinkedIn. And I know there's a lot more platforms, but I'm still new at this. So that's how I've been primarily networking. And I really haven't had anybody who's been just too busy to take 5 minutes and answer some questions.
I think that's a really interesting point, since we're going to talk about, I think when, especially with stuff like this, where you're asking people to give you either opinions or advice. And Sean, you've probably had this kind of same exact idea when somebody does the sort of classic, I want to pick your brain email, right? There's a couple of those messages that come in, and I almost feel like there's a way that we could set up because I wasn't originally going to go here, but this is really one of those things that was a big level up for me. When you're gonna talk to somebody about stuff, it's not just, oh, I want to pick your brain. I usually start with, these days, I have like 2 or 3 maybe topics, specifically questions that I would like to ask you specifically, not please in 30 seconds give me everything that you've ever done in the last
Right. Please
That-
dump all of your knowledge into my brain like
Right.
that.
Just pour it on in. Yeah, that's so true. I want to comment on that too, because that was one thing that we talked about at the very beginning of the cohort. Was Herb told us, learn from people before you ask them for things. Try to research them. You know, if you don't know what Linux is, look it up before you say, hey, Brad, what you doing? Tell me all about your life. And you know, your copious amounts of free time, like do the research to kind of see, look at ServiceNow careers. Those tell you exactly what the job does. Then find somebody who is part of that and reach out. So
yeah, I mean, then you're doing your kind of due diligence. It's not sort of a like kind of a lazy like shotgun approach to it, right? You're just going out there. You're specifically finding people, researching them, reading what they've written, then finding questions to ask them about what they've written or what they've done. Or what they've put out there. Yeah.
yeah.
And I find that to be really an impressive way to go about it, to be honest, right? And it was something I didn't learn for a long time. And I was in the video game industry for a while. And my first, as a teen and in my early 20s, I was like, how do I get to be you? Right? Was like the one question I would ask people. Like I would ask a producer, like, and they'd be like, yeah.
I still kind of feel like that though. Like after you took your course and all your unicorns and everything, we're still like, we kind of want to be you, but you have to have some couth about it. You can't just, you know.
That's a great word. Couth is awesome. I love that.
And, yeah.
We can't always be immediately sparkly unicorns like Ben, but we can try.
It's
I mean,
okay.
I'm still trying. This sparkle isn't sparkling tonight. Like we're trying, but like we'll get there eventually.
Let me ask Bradley if I can. I will keep wanting to call you Bradley. I'm sorry, sir.
That's
But how about for you? Like I a while back, I'd written an article about community is the best job experience you can get in your pajamas. But how about you? Like how do you connect with people? Like I think about what Emily does, and I'm like, to do UX and you by definition experience, you've got to talk to people.
Mhm.
On the other hand, when I think writing script and code and those things, maybe not so much talk with the people. So how do you connect with people to bring in and learn stuff and get information for building? And what are your tips and tricks for that?
Well, so it actually boils down to why I'm writing the code. You know, what is the purpose of the code? So if the code is for myself, then it's all self-contained. But if the code is more commonly for other people, you know, what are your, and it's just like we do in business, right? What are your requirements? Okay, what is our scope? You know, but so if I'm doing something for someone else, we still have to, even on a personal level, we have to do follow those business plans of creating a plan and creating our user stories. What is it that this has to accomplish? So it really depends on what it's for. If it's for me, then, you know, I'll reach out to people that I know have done stuff like the Ben Forrest and the Sean McLean, but I'll say, hey guys, have you heard anything like this or done anything like this? But if it's and right now I'm, you know, my home board game thing, I talk to my buddies and say, okay, what is it that you want to see out of this? What would help you interact with this more? What would make this something that you go back to? And then I use that as my user stories and those are my bullet points. And I don't know if I'm answering your question. I'm kind of
that's interesting. So you're going to the people that you're not reaching out to people you don't know. You're taking information you get from people you don't know and asking the community of people you do talk to and go, what about this? Does this make sense? Is that right? Okay. Yeah. That's cool because you're bringing ideas that are farther out and bringing them into your network of people you already know and helping to see if they can connect, if it makes sense. It's that sniff test, right? Does it make sense to you or am I crazy? And then
100%.
Yeah, but Brad, that's also user research. and
Mhm.
user interface. I mean, you're doing it too, even though you're scripting and I'm not yet. That is what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny. You're
Yeah.
doing some of it already without realizing it.
Yeah.
So it's the skill set.
Hmm.
Sorry, I dropped out of the conversation for just a second, guys. I was putting together a couple of links. I've been thinking about this as I just wanted to put these into the chat here. I was like, gotta get them out there.
Nice.
Yeah, just some of those things where I was like, man, we need some love, especially for folks that don't understand how difficult and how challenging and how amazing good design can be, and user interface and user experience are some of the most important. And when we're designing even apps, even though even if you might be doing a low code or a no code app, the design decisions that you make are impactful. They can change the way people do their job fundamentally day to day. And so I wanted to drop a couple of like little a couple of good reads lists here. You know, some of my favorites from you. Some of you guys have heard me talk about Mike Montiero a lot, but also one that's called User Friendly, which is an excellent book that starts out with the design problem that nearly nuked 3 Mile Island. So it's by Cliff Quang and Robert Fabricant. Great name for a designer, Fabricant. But
Can I jump in, Ben?
yeah.
So and this, if your code is not optimal,
Mhm.
it's still going to work. If your UI is not optimal, it's not going to get adopted. So it's going to be useless. It's not going to get used. So I mean, it's really critical that your interface really meets the needs of the people who are going to be using it.
Yeah.
That kind
That's a
of gets me
really
into
good
how it seems like we've obfuscated computer networking and IP networking and cloud computing. We've made it sort of weird and obscure, and we've kind of placed it in this weird zone where we've made it really unapproachable. And so trying to make it more, well, for lack of a better term, like user friendly,
Mhm.
requires us to kind of think in non-engineering shoes, right? There's always the sort of joke, oh, I've got to go find we've all seen the Tree Swing cartoon, right? Like,
Yes.
Sean knows
Yeah.
what I'm talking about. I'm going to find a link for it here in a sec. But like, basically, when we start thinking like engineers and we assume that everybody knows what we know, then we are doing ourselves and all of our users a disservice, right? If we just start immediately assuming, and we know what assuming does, right? It makes something out of you and me. That's when we're not thinking like an empath, like Emily was saying. So,
Well, I literally, because my job for a decade has been cloud computing, and I had someone ask me, and I had to stop myself after this. They literally asked me, "Is my stuff actually stored in the sky?" And I'm a little bit of a sarcastic person, so my answer was, yes, it is. There's a whole bunch of Zeppelins flying around with Seagate hard drives on them. And
I mean, well, so
So, the one thing that I took away from Google was the next billion users. There are people who have never signed on to the internet, and that just like blew my mind. It's probably the people that really think a cloud is a fluffy cotton ball where your pictures are stored. So,
wow.
yeah, you're gonna have people that
crazy.
think about kids who have never seen, people who have never had a computer in their house.
So Payal, what is that? Payal Aurora? Yeah. So she's the one that I believe coined that term. I'm gonna find that and put it in the chat too, because that's a really great book, and like I'm super glad that Google took it up. Right?
Yeah.
Never touched the internet from a desktop, and my kids don't know why the icon for save is like a little vending machine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting as well, because I think on our overall journey from the career perspective, or the looking at all the different jobs, one of the central themes that we get out of this is to, whether it's get that job or learn that thing, you have to expand your ability to perspective take, right? Because in each one of the examples, so Brad, you're taking outside perspectives and bringing them into people that you talk with regularly. Emily, you're doing almost the opposite. You're reaching out to people with experiences different than you and trying to go, okay, what's that? Or which ones haven't I thought about?
Yeah.
And Ben's talking about examples of designers who've done exactly the same, which is going through and trying to think in advance about the farther out you can reach your perspective taking skills, the better you can connect for not just jobs, but connect learning and new concepts. So that seems to be another like cool and central idea to this. And Ben is throwing out the next. I have to second Ben on the book, but only because Ben gave it to me. So the user-friendly book Ben passed on early on. We'll swap reads. Unfortunately, I'm usually about 10 books behind him.
There's another book I have to add too.
Yeah.
It's called The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman.
That is a great book. Yes.
The one that did the door. So
Yeah.
And actually, Brad, I really liked what you said about building, and you're lifting up a boulder and you find a gym underneath. No, maybe I'm the one with the boulder right now. I think that's what I was thinking about. But just so I have a website, it's just emilyinfinger.com. But if you go look at it, it literally, you can see the progression of when I started at the beginning and my apps I made, and then what I made at the end. It's like really pretty bad at first.
Awesome.
And that's cool to see with ServiceNow, because I just wanted to add that too, because we're like, I messaged you the other day and was like, oh my God, my service portal. And then
I loved it.
Today the light bulb went off and I was like, oh, that's what the update set did. And, so anyway, Brad, I just wanted to throw that in there.
I like to, if I can comment on something Alyssa just said. It was funny because one of my first teaching gigs was last century, I can say that, was teaching retirees basically intro to computers and intro to the internet. And it was basically teaching retirees how to email their grandkids. And the biggest thing I had to tell them was, short of picking the computer up and throwing it across the room, there's very little you can do that is irreparable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
That's awesome.
Do whatever you do, and it can almost always be fixed.
Don't be afraid of it, right? Just go and break it. And that was definitely one of the things that made it so that I think most people in our generation felt comfortable just messing around with stuff, right? Whereas my grandpa used to say, F around until you figure it out.
Right.
Was that Z-Boot is your friend?
What's that?
I said Z-Boot is your friend. Is that it?
Oh, well, I mean, didn't say that, but it's basically the same thing.
Well, and I'm always the guy who wants to back up and sum up and point out that when you mention Z-Boot, we should probably mention Z-Boot is a concept that resets your ServiceNow instance to 0. Z-Boot, just in case, with a long eyebrow for the trivia and the shout out to Wally Marks, is also the name of the band that back when we were just 300 people or so, it was the process that they did to reset their systems. But then a couple of the guys who played different band instruments got together and made their band and called it Z-Boot. I gotta ask, Brad, is that a concept that's not? I always thought it was ServiceNow specific, but I mean, there's Reboot and all that.
You're talking about so Z-Boot in general. The name, I haven't come across it, but the concept 100%.
Yeah. I just wasn't sure if Z-Boot was the term. Z-Boot was unique to ServiceNow, or if it was like,
as far as I know, it is.
Oh no! It goes way back. It's from a boot manager and partition manager.
Oh, gotcha.
All the way back to the 90s that we used to use to basically set up, you'd script and you'd set up a series of rack servers or whatever.
And I never put that together.
Yep.
Yeah,
mainline thing.
I remember it.
Manager still around, open source.
Yeah.
It's probably maintained by one person these days.
Nice. This is like the infamous drop tables jokes from XLCD, right?
Oh no. Yeah. By the way, guys, and ladies and gentlemen and anybody else out there, don't ever jokingly put the middle name of your cat or child to be $, drop table, whatever, semicolon, drop table, pets. In my case, I accidentally nuked my vet's system, and it was just supposed to be a joke. I didn't really think they'd put it in there.
No one will ever do that.
No one
They'll
would
never
ever do
pass
that.
it into a database.
Nope. And I was
That-
just trying to be silly, like like
The-
XKCD. Like it's his fault, right? Really.
The drop table clear all command on a table would never happen if you used it in a real experience. That's crazy. That'll never happen. Oops.
Right. Yeah. Exploits of a mom from XKCD 327. I'll put it here in the notes. Little Bobby Tables is what they call him. It was Little Jimothy Tables at the vet's office. And I had to do a little bit of freelance IT work.
Just to repair their systems.
Yep.
Let me ask both of you just another, and I'm going to flip it and start with Brad and jump to Emily if I can. We were talking about all of the technical stuff, right? We talked about user experience, and we talked about, hardware experience, but then we also started getting into those things that it's really great. I love hearing this now. They refer to it, they used to call it soft skills, the talking, the networking, the communication skills. But let me ask both of you where you think you grow those skills. Because in the ServiceNow and thread that I read in LinkedIn, people were suggesting classes, right? But where can you get or build those soft skills? Where do you go to get those? Or where did you go to get those?
So I'm an anomaly because honestly, all of I have like 2 semesters at community college. So that is my level of education. So everything I've got has been, either on the job or stuff that I picked up on my own. A lot of my interpersonal skills are things that I've had to learn, just because I was not a military brat, but a IT brat. My dad worked for IBM when I was growing up, and in the 70s it stood for I've been moved, and so I changed schools 13 times. So I had to learn those soft skills in meeting people, making friends, being able to talk to people. So I think I'm not a good example for that in any arena, whether it's in the work arena or in the interpersonal arena, because most of it I've had to pick up on my own.
You've learned from just living it.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's that's your degree, is in real life experience. That's awesome.
Exactly.
Okay. Emily, how about you? Any thoughts on it?
I got to piggyback off of what he said.
Okay.
But you know what? It's been interesting because I am extroverted. I don't mind reaching out to people. I was the first person in my job. I worked in the dental office, and I worked in the back with patients, but I also worked in the front. And I was the first person that everyone saw coming in the door. And one thing that we talked about in the office is like that sets the tone for the rest of the appointment. If somebody's looking down and they're like, I don't want to be here, chances are your patient doesn't want to either. So that just like forward facing with the customers, that doesn't bother me. But I do think sometimes you have to make yourself a little uncomfortable in order to learn those people skills. I mean, we're military. I've moved around everywhere. You have to find somebody and you kind of cling to them. Like Alyssa, she's in the group with me, and I'm like, hey, you're going to be my new best friend because I know we don't have it. You know what I mean? So I think sometimes you just really have to push yourself too with those soft skills. Robert Fedork is the one that mentioned hard versus soft skills to me, and that's where I first heard it. And so my husband, like I said, he's going through this with me, and I'm his extroverted security blanket. Like he takes me places and I do the talking, and he hangs out and pets the dog, and then we go home. And that's like, so for him, he's having to push himself. Yeah, for him, he's having to push himself, and he's gotten so he's really good talking to people, but just reaching out and asking for things. It is hard to reach out and ask for things from people, especially when you're asking them about their job and what they do and can they help you outside of their personal hours. So I think just being willing to get on that ledge a little bit, like dip the toe in and just
kind of sitting in the discomfort, right?
Yeah. Even if you reach out to like one person a week and just talk to them,
I love that idea. So for challenging, I'm jotting it down. And Ben, I'm not skipping you in this question. I want your answer on this too, but I'm jotting this down, and it sounds like for the School of Self-Taught, create small challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Small challenges, yeah. Like,
Yeah. Even if it's like one a day, just reach out to one person a day. If you are if you're needing to find that information. So like, once we started talking about what we were going to talk about tonight, Brad, I sent you a connection request on LinkedIn, and then I found one other person that I wanted to talk to on LinkedIn, and I sent them a connection request and a message.
Nice.
And then I just called it a day. It's just one or two people. You don't have
And that
to
kind of builds confidence as you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's funny to me that I know that a lot of times people come to us for technical questions. And I know that people think that I'm an extroverted person. I have said several times, and anybody that's taken the class with me knows that I'm not really an extrovert. I just play one on TV. And what I've gotten good at is, well, not faking it, but like getting skilled at some of the specifics around these sorts of engagements, right? And sitting in the discomfort of interacting with people in a certain way. So being on stage, being at the front of a classroom, talking to multiple people, having difficult conversations, and doing so in a way that makes me feel less uncomfortable. And the only way to do that is just like with several technical skills, it comes to practice.
Okay.
And unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, the thing that I found that is really, really useful for us, for those of us who feel like we're comfortable technically, but maybe not socially, and when we're doing some of the job stuff, I find that forcing yourself into some of these situations and sitting with the discomfort, or as Brene Brown says, rumbling with some of these difficult conversations or some of these difficult moments, can be really helpful because it gives you opportunities to do simulations. And I feel like, you know what, other realms all do this, right? Like, you don't get a pilot who just got certified and then jumps in a plane and flies you to Denver, right?
Right.
Like they get in the simulator, they go in the plane, things go wrong, things don't go according to plan, and you have enough hours doing that. And I feel like we have this weird dichotomy. We call them soft skills versus hard skills, and I really think they're all just skills, right?
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
Ben, I really love your idea of taking those risks or managing those challenges. And I think maybe the being decided about it is the picking the challenges that you can live with.
Mhm.
Like taking those, and Emily, like to your idea of doing the once a day, maybe turning that into whatever size it is you can afford a failure. When we think about, I love that, Alyssa. That's awesome. It seems like the challenge there is setting challenges that are low enough a bar. When you mentioned pilots, I have my brother-in-law is a pilot and several other friends, and one of the first things they do with simulators is crash it every way they can, because the risks to that for them are small. You're doing it in a simulated environment. But I think in learning soft skills, or what are more and more today being called power skills, that aspect of only taking those risks that you can feel comfortable or okay losing at to get better would be your answer in that. I want to know, and Robert, yes, they are recorded, and so a couple people have asked, are these recorded? They're recorded and they're found on Ben's LinkedIn feed, as well as I believe through YouTube. But I also want to ask, since we have other people here to contribute, we have 4 people whose faces you're seeing and voices you're hearing. But what about you? Like, if you're in here and watching, do you have tips for either external experience that you would gain in addition to ServiceNow, but also more interesting, because this seems to be where the conversation is headed, where do you get or build or learn those power skills? Those skills that aren't necessarily, I passed a test on this, but networking, communication, public speaking, interviewing, those things.
What my
Put them in the chat.
BFF just said.
What did she say? Oh, do something.
I like what my BFF just said. Yeah, do something forward facing. Even if it's like I feel like if you just go to the grocery store and like say, sometimes, and maybe this is a girl thing, but I walk by and I'm like, oh man, I really like her shirt. And just like dropping that compliment and just like talk to somebody that you don't know. Or if you're at the checkout and you're like, hey, how you doing today?
That's exactly it. That's exactly what I was going to say, is take every opportunity to flex those or stretch those skills to practice those skills in an environment where it's not necessarily there's low risk, right?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't hurt anything to make a little bit more conversation with somebody when you're out, and that just, maybe they're receptive to it, maybe they're not. But the other thing that keeps coming up in our cohort is imposter syndrome, and I know we've all heard that phrase before, but it's really cool to sit here tonight and like talk to you guys, because from my point of view looking in, and from everybody in our cohort where we're only 10 weeks into service now, I mean, you guys are like gods to us. And so it's really awesome to see that the flip side of the coin and talking about this too.
That's that's really great and cool to hear. I think one of the coolest things about ServiceNow in general is the community and that helpfulness that everyone else has, because we were all at different points of not knowing this. And I think most of us still remember those days in that component. I love Ben is backside kind of working to check on our recording stuff. But his comment is the slay the imposter syndrome. Those are some pieces that would also be good ones for upcoming episodes and sessions for us to talk about. I think one of the things we want to be able to do is to kind of pursue this topic, this ServiceNow and into some other specific places. Now, one of the things we have is many different personas or roles in this session alone, from trainer to portal design to web design to those pieces. And maybe as we go into upcoming office hours, we spend a focus session on here's a persona of the admin. What are the outside resources and skill sets? Now let's dive deeper and talk about some of the power skills and where we could get those. And let's do the same with some other folks out there as well. Let me check also. I just want to see if we have any other feedback on the LinkedIn on ideas and places to get more information on those outside resources.
I think that's a great idea too. Maybe not tonight, but seeing how we can take, and I don't know, maybe if it's building something, but seeing how I can take the UI side of things and then work with Brad. And Brad, the coding, and I don't know that yet. How can you combine those two things together? I don't know if it's possible, like a live thing where you're like, okay, combine it together to build something that merges the two skills, because that's the path that I'm on, is learning how to do that. And
perfect.
I think that'd be really cool to like sit down and say, okay, how could we, now that we've talked about it, how could we merge these skills together to make something out of it?
Well, I think the answer is you have to have something to make, and that's going to drive. So come up with a project or find someone who needs a project.
And I just make like a project for myself.
Yeah.
Funny you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Okay,
well,
good.
And Alyssa, you said that I've been watching a lot of you guys in the next gen find ways to apply some of the stuff in and around things that you guys are doing in your day-to-day lives, right? So watching people make portals for their side hustles or their businesses, or they're trying to find ways to manage inventory. Yeah, right. So like, I think a lot of it comes down to just, I now know that I have this hammer, right? And I have maybe a whole bunch of other tools, right, with the platform. And I've also picked up all of these other screwdrivers and a drill and and I'm now getting to the point where I can actually build a house or build something, right? And now I almost feel like sometimes the platform is less of a tool, and it's the wood, it's the lumber, right? Like it's all the skills that you bring to the site, right? And ServiceNow is the lumber and the foundation you build your new house on, or your business, or the other thing on, and less of a tool, right? And we never say tool when it comes to ServiceNow, but it's more of a platform, right? So it's like you're getting to bring all of the things together on top of the site in a way, right?
I said that, and then I'm literally on the cusp of the final boss, the final project at the end of this. Yeah. Where we make something on our own in our group. So maybe we should table that, and then like in 2 weeks I'll have made something.
But
I
love that. Getting some good stuff in the chat too. Yeah, people just like fixing something and then you just finding a problem and then finding a solution wherever you may be with whatever you've got at hand. And I love that. Love that. So given that this is our kind of first in our new cadence and kind of doing our new thing, I want to thank you guys for coming on the show tonight and just talking about bringing stuff into this space, into this sphere, bringing your knowledge and your interests and helping people figure out how can they apply their knowledge, their interest, their curiosity, and figure out how to apply it in other ways. And I'm like really grateful that you guys came onto the show tonight.
Yeah, the same. It's been really fantastic.
Oh, pleasure. Definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This has been
Awesome.
amazing.
So normally around this time, we would be getting into sort of all of the, Ask Me Anythings and some of the extra credits and all of that. But I think given sort of like where we ended up on the show topics tonight, I feel like we're in a really good spot to tie this up in a nice bow. And I hope everybody knows that they can still go and take the CSA and they can go on to the fundamentals course. It's still on Now Learning. It's been extended, through Halloween, Sean? I can't even remember now.
Through
We're gonna have
October
to do
30 for sure.
That means we're going to have to do a spooky episode and we're going to have to build a spooky app.
I got a plan for that. We got to talk.
All right. So my only thing that I want to end on is the thing that we do every time, which is the extra credit. And I hope that people in the comments or in the notes or wherever you find this podcast will email us and let us know what flavor are you trying out with ServiceNow. So if this is like, are you trying pickles in ServiceNow? You're trying peanut butter in ServiceNow? You're trying jelly, jam, spicy? I don't know. I don't know your life. Maybe you're bringing ITOM. Maybe you're bringing app design and UX, UI. You're bringing whatever you might bring to the platform. We want to know about it and we want to hear about it and we'll talk about it out there next time. So thank you guys all so much for joining us tonight. And I'm going to go ahead and call it.
Sounds perfect, sir. Thank you.
Awesome.
Oh, and now we're going to have to figure out if on this setup, I'm going to have to figure out if I can actually go into the, oh, no, we got it. All right, cool. We'll catch you all, as he says, tentatively, we'll catch you guys all next time.